everybody? Thanks for tuning in. This is the Fantasy Football Outpost. My name is Dallas,
And I'm Jay.
and we are back. It's been a while since you've seen anything uploaded to this channel, and as you can see now, we actually have a co-host. This is not me having a guest. We do this together. We are both Fantasy Football Outpost. I was excited to bring him on. You can kind of explain to them a quick little rundown of why you wanted to jump in, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, we just in a couple of leagues together and throwing ideas back and forth, and seem to have some similar hot takes. So just a great person to vibe with and bounce ideas back and forth off each other. So great outlet for this is to put it together in this kind of format. So
Yeah.
excited to be on board.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I caught on right away. I was like, we agree on a lot, and the things that we disagree on, other people, it drives me crazy because like, where are you getting that from? But with
Right.
you could explain it. I'm like, crap, that makes sense. Like, and then I'd be like, well, maybe I need to dial back and rethink the way I've been looking at. We just kept doing that over and over again. I was like, I've been thinking about kicking off the podcast again, and I think it'd do a whole lot better with somebody else. So I'm no longer the Fantasy Football Outpost. If you know me from Sleeper, I am Dallas from the Fantasy Football Outpost, and he's Jay from the Fantasy Football Outpost. Or
Yeah.
as you can see, our Twitter's below. Pick on the block. Make sure you go follow. Share this around as much as you can. Don't keep us a secret because it's going to be really helpful. But the way you grow the fantasy community is by sharing this kind of stuff. So in today's episode, we're doing things a little bit differently as we kick things off. Typically, you're going to get a longer form version of our podcast where we have a topic, break things down, whatever the case is. But because kickoff is so soon, we're going to bust through all of our rankings for you so that we can get them out. So we're going to go ahead and kick off with quarterbacks first, and our quarterbacks episode. So I'm going to go ahead and let Jay kick it off for us.
All right. So we're gonna go through our top quarterbacks. Our first quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. Big surprise there. But far and away the best quarterback in the league right now. Dallas.
I think he's one of those where like you partially know that something's going to happen and he's not going to finish the one, but I don't see how anybody under anything that he's done can project anything other than one, unless you have Lamar Jackson rushing for like 2,000 yards. I just don't see any reason you can put anybody ahead of Patrick Mahomes. Between the sheer passing volume, they brought back almost every single piece of their offense. It's the same system. He's going to be airing it out. He finished, 3 last year off of an injury. So I just don't see how you can put anything other than Mahomes up top. So moving on to number 2, we've got Lamar Jackson. Patrick Mahomes, we both had at 1. Lamar Jackson, he's got it 2. I've actually got him at 4. And I'll break that down a little bit, but I'll go ahead and let him kick off the main reasons why for Lamar, and I'm going to give the reasons why I'm a little bit lower on him, but I still think he's going to kill it this year.
Yeah, I definitely I agree that there'll be some regression from Lamar. I mean, last year was insane, but I think even though his passing touchdowns will probably go down, Baltimore might be a little more balanced with adding Dobbins in another year with adding DeVornay and Boykin. I think he's still going to score a lot with some rushing touchdowns. So even though his passing touchdowns may go down and the rushing touchdowns will go as well, that combined, I still think is going to be above whoever you have as your next quarterback. So I think those two, even with some regression, putting those rushing touchdowns where the number is between 6, 8, or 10 with his rushing yards plus the passing touchdowns, I just see overall that's still going to be the second, if not the first overall quarterback.
So my whole explanation to why I'm the crazy one to drop Lamar Jackson out of the top 3, top 2 is it's two sides. One is our next 2 guys on the list I have above him. So it's not just him regressing. I think other guys are going to step up and have amazing years. But I have this small, and I could be crazy theory behind it, but watching them in the playoffs last year, everybody's going to be like, well, yeah, but he threw 500 passing yards, so I don't see how that's a good point. Was against Tennessee, they actually forced Lamar Jackson outside, and it absolutely killed his efficiency. And last year, nobody was prepared for Lamar Jackson at all, and they were trying to make guesses in game on how to stop him. And so he would either run all over them, or they'd make adjustments for that. And when they did, he'd just throw it right over their heads. I mean, anybody that's played Madden knows that trick where you run with the quarterback and the defender comes off and then you throw it right over their head to the guy they just pulled from. It's like that in real life. He's literally a cheat code. And so he had this phenomenal year last year. And what I think is going to happen is the same thing that happened to Dak. It came out that rookie year. I know it was Lamar's second. He came out that rookie year, absolutely was amazing. And then the next year, people planned for him, and he got smacked in the face with the reality with what this league can do, how defense does. So I still have him finishing with an astronomical amount of points, but I have him losing about 10 passing touchdowns, and then I've also got his efficiency rushing dropping. I still have him with 141 rushing attempts, but I have his yards per carry at like 4.9. I've not completed my full projections, but I have done his, and so that brings his rushing yard total down to like 69 or 690. And I give him 7 rushing touchdowns and 26 passing touchdowns. Still kept him efficient, but if you compare that to his last year's numbers, that's how you get that dip. And so that's why I got Lamar Jackson there at 4. That's my narrative street on it. You can ask Jay here. I've been called absolutely crazy for it, but it's just I've got a path of reasoning for it, and I can see it happening. And if he does do what most quarterbacks do, is regress pretty significantly, then I think I've figured out how it's going to happen. But then again, I could be crazy, and he could come out and be the one again. Fully understand that as well.
Yeah, I think everything reason you said why he drops is I agree with. I mean, I think all of them could happen. Mahomes, his crazy year, they were like, oh, defense will just figure him out and they won't be as good. And you can
And they
see
didn't.
how that worked out for the Chiefs the
Big.
next year. So I think, as much as defenses will adjust, I think that the Ravens will as well. So
Yeah.
we'll see. It'll be good. So the next quarterback we have is Dak Prescott. So Dallas had Dak at number 2, and I had Dak at number 4. So I'll let Dallas kind of kick off why he had him at 2, and then I'll talk about why I kind of a little bit lower.
So my reasoning behind Prescott, and this is something I'm going to give full disclosure on. I am a Cowboys fan, but I do not ever let it impact my ranking. This has nothing to do with that at all. I solely am basing it on last year when you see how efficient they were, and he was, what was he, like 80, 90 yards shy of 1,000 or 5,000 passing yards. I think he's going to pass 5,000 yards this year. I think it's going to be an astronomical year on the passing game for him. Also see him jumping up to the almost 40 mark, if not crossing the 40 mark in passing touchdowns. And I think his efficiency rises. There's a couple main reasons for that. One, McCarthy came in now, and it's not Jason Garrett anymore. But the part I love about that is McCarthy actually stepped back and let Kellen Moore be the one who had the reins on the offense. And last year, that was the first year Kellen Moore really got to unleash his offense, and you've seen what was resulted from it. And now you got another year, you got a veteran coach that's won a Super Bowl coming in, and he can improve on what Kellen Moore already built and add to it. Plus, the thing I've not even mentioned yet is that they somehow, for some crazy reason, were able to get CeeDee Lamb in the draft at like number 16, I believe it was, or 17. They were able to get CeeDee Lamb at 17, and I personally believe CeeDee Lamb is I had him as the best wide receiver in this class. I think Jay probably did too.
Yes.
He all around receiver. He's that next Alpha X in my opinion. You got ones at the top that are elite, but the ones that are in the class by themselves are, in both of our opinions, Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins. That's because they can do literally everything. They don't excel at short yard passes. They don't excel at route running. They don't excel at just like the deep threats. They can do everything, and they excel at all of it. And CeeDee Lamb, by no means am I comparing him to Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins yet. I'm just talking about his skill set. That's why he's being compared to Hopkins, is because that's what he thrives at. So if he takes the steps necessary, great. The best part about all of this is he doesn't really have to, because he's the Cowboys wide receiver 3 behind Gallup, who absolutely exploded last year. And then Amari Cooper, somebody else that we'll talk about when we get to our wide receiver rankings, that's why I'm higher on him. I think Dak Prescott, everybody's trying to figure out who's going to be the wide receiver. But is it going to be CeeDee Lamb? Is it going to be Michael Gallup? Is Blake Jarwin going to have a say in all of this? And the one thing I've taken from all of it is green light for Dak. And he's once again, because he's betting on himself, on another contract year because he got franchise tag. And if he comes out and proves it, they're going all in, signing Everson Griffin. This team wants to win a Super Bowl. They're going to completely unleash. And I think when you factor all those in, I've got Dak Prescott having an absolute.
Yes, I mean those are all good points. The only thing that you forgot is the best player on the Cowboys, and that's Ezekiel Elliott. And so my reason for having Dak now, when I say lower, I mean he's 4, so I mean he's not that much farther down. I just don't see the offense really flowing through him. I like Kellen Moore's work, but I think he kind of ran in. He kind of had the college inserts. Like the advantage of having a different style of play, and they had that really early season success on that offense, and it kind of fizzled out. Defense adapted to it, so I'm curious to see what kind of playbook he'll put in there with McCarthy coming in. But I think though, even though I agree with those receivers on the outside, they're going to have a great team and scheme and offense. I don't think it'll be quite as high flying as projected, which is why I don't have him higher than 4. By no means do I have him low, and I have him above, Kyler Murray, and they're going to pass the ball a lot. The only other thing is I don't feel strong enough about Dak being the primary focus of that offense, just because of the presence of Zeke, to put him above Russell Wilson, who is the guy out in Seattle. So that's why I have him right below Russell as my QB4.
And with that, that's 100% the only reason what I said doesn't happen. Because I find it crazy. People are like, oh, Elliott lost a step and he was washed and he had 1,300 screens. But I can absolutely see a world where, because of all that, and because of how efficient the passing game is, people are constantly respecting, Amari, CD, and Gallup, and Jarwin all around. It just opens up these massive lanes for arguably the best, if not maybe second or third best pure runner in the league to go absolutely berserk this year. So the way I've kind of projected things is that Elliott's efficiency goes up in touchdowns, not necessarily in yards because of the opportunities, but it 100% could go that way too, and that would definitely be the path to why Dak Prescott wouldn't finish as the 2 like I have. All right, so our number 4 quarterback that we have here is Kyler Murray. Everybody's really excited about the breakout. I'm gonna let Jay go ahead and explain because we're both on the same page with this.
So I have Kyler Murray 5 in my rankings. This is similar to what we said about Kellen Moore over at Dallas, is the Cliff Kingsbury effect. So typically the college coach comes in, has some new novel ideas, implements them, they work, and then there's a shift into the NFL scheme to where it's almost like a sophomore slump, but typically happens at the second half of the first season. And so I think that Kingsbury is going to implement a lot of this stuff at Texas Tech, but people kind of forget that Kingsbury wasn't great at Tech. They were an average team. And they could put up a lot of points. And so I'll be curious to see how they navigate the game management part. And if they do need to kind of air raid and throw the ball. And I think with the addition of Drake and the other improvements on the team, they might pull that usage down. 1, to kind of protect Kyler, and 2, to have a more balanced team. So I think he's going to have a fantastic year. I mean, he's my QB5, but that's kind of the same question marks around Dak. So that Dak, Kyler, Russell conversation is kind of right in the same area for me. Is how is the team going to operate as a whole? That's kind of why I have Kyler right there where I have him.
And then the reason I have them just a couple spots higher is because those question marks, although they are there, I don't think they hold as heavy of a weight as they do Dallas because of the division. So you look in Dallas, should be ideally, with all the injuries in Philadelphia, head and shoulders above anybody else offensively in that division. And so the way they build their team, all teams do it, you look at your division first. You got to win the division first, and then you worry about everything else. So when you look at the NFC West that the Cardinals are in, you have the Rams, which aside from a few sputters last year, they're still high-powered offense. That offensive line is their main thing got to fix. You look at the 49ers, who absolutely skyrocketed in their game last year. And then you also still have Seattle, and we all know what they can do, especially if all the rumors are true and they decide to let Wilson pass a little bit more. That's going to be a high-powered offense to keep up with. You're going to kind of see the same on in the AFC, where everybody in the Chiefs division are trying to improve their offenses to try and keep up. I think that's what this division is going to be as well. It's probably the best division in the NFC. You're starting to mimic a little bit of what you see in the NFC South, where it's just going to be high scoring. So that does lead me to question, because they've got a very talented defense. And so I could see that being a thing where they're so efficient on defense that things start to dial back, but I really don't think they're going to be one of the absolute top elite defenses. So I have Kyler Murray still projected to absolutely go berserk this year. His main improvements for me are going to be on the efficiency side. Having DeAndre Hopkins there is only going to make you better. And almost everybody already had Kyler Murray breaking out this year before they signed DeAndre Hopkins. And then once they signed DeAndre Hopkins, that was what pushed him up over Deshaun Watson for most people. And you saw it in drafts if you're active in the drafts over the summer. And just Kyler Murray should be absolute explosive hit. And the great part about him and Dak this year are that they are both going in like round 6 in one quarterback redrafts. And my philosophy has always been I wait till like round 9 at the earliest because the Daks and Kylers are usually in like round 3 or 4. But this year they're in round 6, and that's absolutely insane. And so I grab them both. I literally wait till round 6 once I have my team constructed and I look and see which one's there. If I'm getting to pick first, I have Dak ranked above Kyler Murray, but I do think the ceiling is higher for Kyler. And so I take Kyler over Dak, but the way I project them, I have Dak finishing one spot ahead. But Kyler should be an absolute smash this year.
Yeah, when I draft kind of the same way, I have my Mahomes and Lamar that are typically gone when I'm drafting. Then the next tier for me is that Dak, Murray, Wilson tier. And so if I see one of those guys right around my quarterback range, I'll snag one of them. So I definitely agree with you on that. Catching the quarterback late in those, especially in those one quarterback leagues.
Yep.
The next guy we have on our list as the number 5 quarterback is Russell Wilson. Dallas, you talk a little about why we have Russell at number 5.
All right, so you've got Russell at 3. I've got him at 6. Russell Wilson is somebody that year in, year out, I don't draft in fantasy, but year in, year out, he finishes absolutely amazing every single year. And I say it being a little dramatic, but I always make the joke that he Tyreek Hill's way to the top spot because he has these massive games and then he lets you down. But then when you go look and it's like, did he let me down? It's like, oh, he scored 35 last week and then he scored 15. And it's because that 35 was so for you, the 15 was when if he didn't score the 35, the 15 really wouldn't have been that upsetting. And you kind of see the same thing with Tyreek Hill where he'll drop these insane like 38-point games and he'll come out and drop 16. You're like, you got to be kidding me. So it's something that it's a silly reason to be a little bit lower on, but he's somebody that's always going to be one of the top guys. And then, like we were mentioning earlier, if they end up letting him pass more, it's game over. I mean, on a talent-wise scale, I personally think he's the second best quarterback in the league behind Mahomes, just on what he has to work with in his decision making and being able to get out of the pocket and scramble and still make these insane plays. So Russell Wilson's one of those where if the value is there in a draft, I will take him. I just usually am looking elsewhere around where he goes. So if like for me, if I miss out on Dak and Kyler, I'm probably just punting it and waiting till later to grab like one of the guys we mentioned later. And I'll get into that because he's my favorite redraft quarterback to go for. But I love Russell Wilson, but those are my reasons why I don't have him up there with. I have him a tier below those top 4, and you have them included. So I'll let you explain.
Yeah, so I think Russell Wilson is going to start the season frustrating people. I think there's a lot of question marks with Seattle as every year with how their offense is going to run. But right now, we're not quite sure about Disley. We're not quite sure about Penny. We're not quite sure about Cart. Like you're just not sure about how that offense is going to run. The only guys you feel confident about are Lockett and Metcalf. Well, who's getting Lockett and Metcalf the ball? And I think the question marks back and forth about will Russ cook and will they let him? I think they're going to start running the ball, trying to keep the same good defense. Got the Adams move and to start the year, and it's not going to work. They're going to have some average record, and they're going to have to open it up. They're going to have to score more points, and I think Russ is going to dominate. I totally agree with Dallas in the fact that Russ has these amazing weeks and these average-ish weeks, and you might see some of that again this year. But I think at the end of the day, he's going to win you some weeks, and definitely towards the end of the season, once they realize what they have, and he kind of says, "Finally, let me have the ball and go." I think it's going to really make some fantasy owners pretty happy. So,
And
that's why I have him so high.
I think for security reasons, I can 100% putting him in that first tier. Because like the rest of these guys down the list, there are question marks around all of them. Wilson, there's no question. He's going to be a top 10 guy. Book it. And it's just, how is he going to win you a week? He will, a couple times. Is he going to pull what you're hoping to get from that ADP? Which luckily this year, his ADP is around 7, 8. And so like I'm fine with that. So don't hear what I'm not saying. It's usually like round 5. And right there is like prime time, like the tail end of the running backs or top tier wide receivers. And I just, my own personal self, I don't ever look his way. But he's somebody where, like, if you aren't the type to take risk with waiting on quarterbacks and you want that security, he's about as secure as it gets.
Yeah, he's been falling almost a round or a half round after the Kyler.
Yep.
There's kind of the Kyler hits, and so when I see that, I'll sometimes take him there just because he's falling,
Yep.
in theory, but he's a top 5 quarterback for me. But if we're talking in the early range, I'm not taking him early. Just too much value otherwise. But just one of my top guys.
All right, so at our number 6 ranked quarterback, we've got Matt Ryan. I have him at number 5. Jay has him at number 7. So
Yeah, I just think I totally am for Matt Ryan. I'm a believer of the even odd years. I saw that tweet one time ago, and I was like, "What is he talking about?" And then this is a Matt Ryan on year, and I am a believer that if you are really high on the wide receiver one and the wide receiver two on a team, and in this case also the tight end, then you also have to be high on the quarterback. And so I think with Julio, who's still dominant, Calvin Ridley, the way we're projecting him, the way that offense can move the ball, I just can't see. I can't not have Matt Ryan in almost that top 10 of quarterbacks, even at his age. Everyone's pumping up Hayden Hurst. So if you're pumping up Hayden Hurst, you think Todd Gurley's going to be great. All of the first round picks, uh, Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley are all going to be great. Somebody's got to give him the ball. So that's kind of why I have Matt Ryan right there. Dallas, what's your thoughts on Matt Ryan?
I literally don't have any different of a take at all. I was excited to see what you were going to say, and that's literally exactly my point I've made with Matt Ryan this whole time. Going into the offseason, I really wasn't that high on him because I just didn't give him any thought. Really, is Matt Ryan. And then I started realizing Julio Jones is going to be a monster. And then I've jumped on that ship like almost everybody else with Calvin Ridley this breakout year. I, more than almost anybody else I know, am like the front runner on the Hayden Hurst train. And I think he's going to absolutely be a monster tight end. And then Todd Gurley, I did my projections for Atlanta, and as much as I've dogged Todd Gurley, he ended up doing better than I had envisioned him in my head. So, just like you said, if all of these weapons are going to be great, why isn't the quarterback? So I just don't see a world where you have this much talent and this much opportunity, and it's your on year. So you got to do it. So I'm all about Matt Ryan this year, and he's a good value. You get him in like round 8, I believe it is. And so he's one guy, round 9 in some cases too. He's one guy that I've heard a lot of people shooting for that Julio Matt Ryan stack. Which I mean, if you pull that, that's got you've got a powerhouse weekly. So
Yeah, I have that in our redraft league actually.
do you? Yeah,
Pretty. Oh yeah.
yeah.
The next one we have on the list is Deshaun Watson, our number 7 quarterback. Dallas, you have him at number 6, and I have him number 8, so not too far apart. You want to talk about why you have him, or let's say it backwards. You have number 8, I have him at number 6.
All right. So for Deshaun, it's literally just a weapons thing. I don't think there's a whole lot of deep analysis. You lose, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in the NFL. You're gonna take a hit from it, but that has nothing to do with Deshaun Watson. That's 100% the situation around him. So that's why I dialed him back some. And with his current ADP, he's another great steal this year, because he's one where I like Deshaun Watson. I just don't like any of his weapons, and so I don't think there's any one individual wide receiver of his that's just gonna blow you away. Everybody's trying to figure out, is it Will Fuller? Is it Brandon Cooks? Honestly, the one that I'm probably gonna have more than any of them is probably Randall Cobb, just because he's the only one that I think is gonna stay healthy, and he's gonna be a nice, throw in on a bye week flex kind of thing that I get for free off the waiver wire. So if I'm being completely honest, I think all these guys are going to do well. You're never going to know which one's going to do well. But the one thing you can take from all of that is their quarterback has been doing. And that's Deshaun Watson. I also think he improves on his rushing this year because I think he's not really going to have a choice. And he's one of those guys that he reminds me so much of Russell Wilson. He puts the whole team on his back and just goes. So I think this is another great year for him. But because of losing some weapons, I don't see over the top seasons that he has had, but I still think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, there's so my thoughts on Deshaun Watson, there's 3 quarterbacks of the top 12, the top 2 quarterbacks that don't have a top 15 wide receiver. Lamar Jackson, Dallas, the other 2?
Uh, if I'm having to guess right now, it would Carson Wentz, one of them,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson, right? So we know Lamar Jackson's going to do, and I see Deshaun Watson being a lot more like Lamar Jackson than Carson Wentz coming into the year. Whereas you said putting the team on his back, I think Deshaun's going to rush more. He's going to find random guys that get open. And I think overall he's just going to be very, very productive because he has to. There's not the same guys around him. We're not sure if David Johnson's going to be there all season, healthy. There's so many question marks about how the team is going to run. So they're going to put more on Deshaun's back. And I think in the end of the day, for fantasy purposes, it's going to give us more production, even though we don't have that elite player as wide receiver as you would have had in the past.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Deshaun Watson is a very secure pick. And then to continue that conversation going, our number 8 quarterback on the list is Carson Wentz. I have him at number 11. You have him at number 8, but when we get back here to this back end, things start jumping around. That's why he's our number 8. We both have him as a 1. I'll let you go ahead and kick off Wentz.
Yeah, so Carson Wentz, I am not necessarily I call myself a Carson Wentz truther, but I've actually come around onto him because he was one of the I saw like a tweet not long ago about one of the few quarterbacks that had I don't know the exact number, but like 4,000 yards and no receiver over a certain number of catches or yards. It's like he's been able to make do with a very like random group around him. And so I think if you get some pieces healthy, he's continue to have Ertz, Goddard continue to break out, and then with the addition of Rager and then the improvements of Sanders, the core he's going to work with this year is going to be one of the best cores he's had in the last couple of years, with regardless of if Alshon Jeffrey or Deshaun Jackson are healthy or not. And so I think if you add in those guys becoming healthy, he's going to have some really nice tools around him, and kind of be in the same conversation, not quite in the same tier, but in the Atlanta or Los Angeles Rams type offense. And there's a really strong receiving running back, really good outside receivers, a really strong tight end to where if you're really high on Ertz, you're really high on Sanders, and you think Rager's going to be a great rookie this year, then like I said before, you can't really be down on Wentz because somebody's got to get them the ball. So that's why I have Wentz in the 8th spot.
So for me, the only reason I have Wentz down to 11 is still that injury risk to him and his players around. So I didn't really I don't ever bake injuries into my projections. That being said, there is added risk to him. But the way I see him is as long as he's healthy throughout the whole season, you have two upsides here. You have the Matt Ryan upside, like you were talking about, where all of his weapons around you're high on, they all do good, they're great. Or you have the Deshaun Watson side, where none of his weapons really stand out, and he still has a great year because he has guys that can get the job done around him. That's one thing nobody ever gave credit last year. His weapons are absolutely awful, but they got out there and did what they needed when they were asked to. And it doesn't matter if it's a different guy every snap, every play, every week. As long as who he's throwing the ball to makes the play, and a lot of it's him putting them in a position to make the play, then you're great. And then you got Zach Ertz, who's just going to be reliable this year, where he's just going to absolutely. And that's a dependable target, which should help his efficiency as well, no matter what. And then you also have the back half of the season where Alshon comes back, and if this is a full steam ahead offense, and then you add somebody like Alshon healthy into that system, he could be one of the best playoff quarterbacks this year. So, well, I think he's going to be a good pick. He's super cheap in drafts. I think it's double digit rounds, way back there. So for us to have him at 8 and you can get him that cheap, he's one of those late guys I target a lot. So
So our number 9 quarterback, we had a tie for number 9 quarterback, but our first one is Matthew Stafford. Dallas, you had Stafford at 10. We actually both had Stafford at 10. So you'll talk about why you had him after, say, Josh Allen or at number 10.
all right, so Matthew Stafford was the one I was hinting at earlier. He is my single most favorite quarterback to draft and redraft this year. 2 reasons: super cheap. Unfortunately, people are starting to catch wind of that, and he's rising up to like round 10. Round 9 in some drafts. But if you look at Matthew Stafford the way he began the year last year before he got hurt, and I know it's a small sample size, he looked insane. And then if you believe in Kenny Galladay, then you should believe in Matthew Stafford. 2 reasons why is A, you don't even have to explain you believing in Marvin Jones. You just forget. Nobody doesn't believe in Marvin Jones. Everybody just forgets he exists. That's why he's so far down. He's a value every year when you go to draft. But you have Marvin Jones as well as Kenny Galladay, one of the best deep threats, and Matthew Stafford has always been somebody who's get you at least 4,000 passing yards almost every single year. I think in most cases, especially 6 point touchdown leagues, Matthew Stafford is just going to absolutely smash this year with how late he goes.
Yeah, I have Stafford at 10, but it's a little bit hesitant with that 10. I think with the addition of Swift and just some of the question marks about Stafford's health, that they might kind of pull the reins back a little bit. And I've seen a lot of the projections from when he was healthy and how successful they were. And I was kind of just reading about how the pace that they were on wasn't sustainable at all for
Sustainable,
the
yeah.
whole season. So there's probably going to be a little bit some regression from that stretch. But I mean, he's still a top 10 quarterback for me, but that's kind of why I had him after guys like Goff or Wentz, is that they're bringing in Swift and maybe trying to change that the identity of that team a little bit. So it's somewhat of a question mark for me.
And the one reason why, like, although I do agree Swift could impact things, before the draft, I had Swift as the number one running back because of his pass catching ability. I think he's head and shoulders above on. I don't think they're as big a gap as everybody. But pass catching, I don't even think it's close. He doesn't even hold a light to him. So I think it could go both ways. They can increase the rushing, but I feel like I don't know how much credit I want to give Matt Patricia on doing anything. But if he utilizes Swift correctly, you could see a big time increase in efficiency for Matthew Stafford as well. And you got those little dump offs with somebody that if he gets it in the right position. And so that's something that people like Cam benefited from a couple years ago with Christian McCaffrey. I mean, you got somebody, by no means, Swift is not Christian McCaffrey, but you've got somebody that you can hit on a 2 yard pass and then they take it 30, 40 yards. That is just beefs up a quarterback. So I still think, even with the addition of Swift, it only makes Matthew Stafford better and possibly more efficient. But I definitely, the one detail you mentioned about how with his injury they may scale it back, that is definitely probably the biggest question mark for him, is how healthy is he now that he's back? And with how long he missed, didn't come back like he usually does. I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure, wasn't he one of those guys last year that was thinking about coming back until they had like no shot at all? So he just didn't come back. And so
Yep.
if he
Yep.
was in a position last year to potentially come back at the end of the year, I think with an entire offseason now, and we're starting up the next year, I think his health is probably 100%. Everything looks good at camp from what I'm hearing. So health-wise, I'm not too concerned. But that being said, remember years ago when he first started his career, he was one of those guys that was labeled as injury prone. So it could be coming back now that he's older. So he definitely has that risk there. That being said, I don't think it's going to impact their usage of him, but that definitely is always something you have to worry about. But the great part about Stafford is he's not expensive. So if something does happen, you can correct. And he didn't really hurt you. You're not missing out on like a top tier wide receiver running back by drafting him and then losing him. So you can fill in his production with like Big Ben or something like that later. All right. So with our 9B, as we put it, is Drew Brees. I have him at 7. You have him at 13. So I'm going to go ahead and let you explain why you have him a little bit lower. Like I said, 13 is not an insult, but it's definitely not 7. And so I'm going to have to explain my side too. I'll let you go ahead and explain.
Yeah, so if you notice, you'll hear a pattern with everything that I've said, right? So when we talked about Matt Ryan, you're high up on that offense. Same thing with the Seahawks, you're high on the offense. But the thing about the Saints is, how high are we on the offense as a whole? Now, granted, hear me out. Michael Thomas is amazing, had a fantastic year. Alvin Kamara, if he's healthy, amazing, fantastic year. But everything beyond that is a little bit of a question mark. Jared Cook has been strong, but I don't know how long he can sustain that. They added Emmanuel Sanders. Don't quite know how much production we're going to have there. So I am not low on Drew Brees by any means, but he's definitely getting up there. Last year we had this motivation, feel good story about passing all these records, and I think this year they're going to kind of shift the focus of that team because they can't sustain that. And so I'm not crowning Drew Brees to be done or it's Jameis Winston's season. But when I'm looking at where I'm putting him, I'd have a little bit more faith in the other guys right now. But I have faith in the Saints as a team. I just don't think they'll be primarily focused on Breeze at this point, which will reduce his fantasy value somewhat. So I still think he could easily be a QB1, and I could be wrong. And he's a guy I target late. I just don't have him ranked as a QB1 right now.
All right, so for me, I agree. There's two scenarios here. I decided to go with the one scenario, but the scenario you're discussing is very real. And it just depends on the team's decision. So the scenario I went with is this is last year. They're going guns blazing. He's going to absolutely air it out, try to keep those records going like he has been. But this team has been so close every single year. And the one thing that's been consistent is Breeze has been absolutely lighting it up. And so if they decide to take a different approach this year and dial it back some because they really want to win a championship and they feel like what they've been doing is not going to get them there, then I can absolutely see the path where him just absolutely going berserk doesn't happen. And if that happens, then there's actually increased value in guys like Latavius Murray, where they're going to be running a whole lot more, and we already know Kamara's going to do what he does. And so the weapons, I 100% agree with the Kamara, Michael Thomas, and then who? Emmanuel Sanders is one that I like. But that being said, I feel like personally his skill set conflicts with Michael Thomas so much unless they completely change what Michael Thomas has been doing. But they both do virtually the same thing, and just one is astronomically better at it. And so we'll see. I mean, they're both guys that can get off the break really quick and create fast separation, which is perfect for Drew Brees. And that's why it's Sean Payton. Sean Payton's really where my faith is going with my projection of Brees at 7, is because I think with the addition of Emmanuel Sanders, it's not just, hey, we're targeting Michael Thomas 200 times a game. Like, we can actually split it up a little bit more. And when they're double covering Michael Thomas, I can just turn over here and give Sanders a very similar look. And Breeze excels in that. And then you still have Kamara in the back. I think Sanders actually helps. Because I think it adds one more eye that comes off of Kamara on the passing game. That's why I'm higher on Kamara this year. And because of this, it's another one of those where I'm high on everybody around him. I think he's going to do well. But it really depends on what this team wants to do. I completely see the path where they say, look, what we've been doing isn't working, and we need to change it up. And we feel like this is Breeze's last year. It's our last chance to go get a chip. So if that's the case, then I 100% see the narrative where it dials it back some. And then, like you said, he's still going to be great, but it's not, as elite as we've seen in the past. So, all right, so our number 11, which is actually our 11A, is Jared Goff. I have him at 14, and you have him at 9, so it's kind of the reverse of what we have with Drew Brees. I'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
Yeah, so like I said with Drew Brees, you see my pattern, right? If I have a lot of faith in the Rams offense this year, hear good things out of camp from guys like Van Jefferson, who's kind of a random. I mean, we knew we second round pick, but just being able to produce. I love Robert Woods. We're both huge Robert Woods fan. I think Cooper Kupp is no slouch. So when you're talking about Higbee, Kupp, Woods, and then possibly Akers, depending upon his role. The offense is going to be good this year, and I'm a big believer in Sean McVay. I think some of his mesh flows that he got kind of blown up last year after the great year they had before. I think he's going to regroup and adapt, and I think Goff's going to have a great year. He's one of the guys that I target that's kind of slowly fallen out of favor for people, and I'm fine with that. I'll just happily scoop him up. So I probably have him a lot higher than the people, but I think they're going to have a great year coming forward. So Dallas, you have them all the way down at 14. Tell me why.
So if I'm being completely honest, it's just other guys, nothing to do with him. But I do think he improves from last year. I've seen some of these ridiculous rankings that have him down in like the 20s. I just don't see a world where that happens. Everything you said, I'm fully on board with. The only reason I have him dialed back a little bit is I actually think they return a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be committee or Cam Akers is just going to come in and absolutely tear it up. But I see them being able to run the ball a little bit better this year. That's something they just could not do last year. And I think it's just because Todd Gurley was just not ready for that kind of load. And I'm not saying Cam Akers is, but you've got 3 different running backs there that can tote the ball, and you got a very smart head coach in Sean McVay. I think that's the only thing keeping him a little bit lower for me, because I'm the same boat. I'm trending positive for Jared Goff. Somebody, especially in Dynasty, I grab all the time. Because in Dynasty, I'm young and still going way back behind some of these guys. And so in redraft, especially where there's no commitment like Dynasty, I think he's an easy snag. Like you said, people are passing up on him. They just leave. Believe in Woods? Check. Do you believe in Kupp? Check. I mean, Higbee, I'm a little on the fence with Higbee because I feel like it's not going to be him. It's more so Everett is going to be just as good. So the production's still there for me. So do I believe in their tight end success? Check. And so when you have that kind of stuff around, I have nothing really negative to say about Goff other than I just think they're going to be good at running the ball this year, a little bit better, I should say. And that offensive line, one thing that everybody says about offensive lines, and this kills me that no one ever makes this point, is like, well, their offensive line was horrible last year and they didn't add anybody. Well, one thing about offensive lines that a lot of people don't ever take into account is it is a one of the biggest team-oriented positions in the league, and those guys, every year that you keep the same group together, they get better. That's something nobody ever takes into. They didn't add some superstar, they didn't draft anybody, or whatever the case is. That whole squad played together last year, and they now are all on the same page because that's a big thing. If your offensive line is not on the same page, that's why rookies, when they get signed, that's one of the hardest positions to adapt. Is there's a lot to learn, and when everybody knows the reads, like you got your center saying, "Hey, you need to look over here, check this. When this play happens, watch this." Their offensive line stayed the same, so by default got better, and that's something people don't ever take into account. And so that's just a point I would like to make for him. So I got nothing negative to say about him. I just have a couple of guys ahead of him between us, but it's definitely I have no arguments to having him as high as 7, 8. I could see him finishing. Well, what was he, an MVP candidate 2 years ago? So I mean, the ceiling's there, and with how much of a value he is, he's a smash.
All right, our number 11B or our 12th quarterback is Aaron Rodgers. I have him at number 11, and Dallas, you have him at number 12. So right, pretty close together. You want to talk about why you have him at 12?
I think honestly, it's one of those situations where I feel like 12 is low for his talent, but right where he should be. Production we're going to see, and it's because people are like, well, look at his weapons. His next best receiver behind Devontae Adams is Allen Lazard. Well, I think it's because of that we have him at 12. I mean, he struggled last year, but he still had those games where he absolutely lit it up, so he still got it. If he had better weapons and they actually knew how to draft, then maybe we'd have Aaron Rodgers at like 7. And so I think at 12, it's just more so a fact that Adams is still going to eat, and Aaron Rodgers is still going to be the one feeding it to him. And then I also think with the addition of guys like A.J. Dillon, it's going to improve the run game a little bit more. And I just think that coach wants to run the ball, and I think he's going to be forced out of it. And because it just depends on what they're going to do. If they end up just saying, yeah, we weren't really a 13-3 team last year, and we're just going to try to see what pieces we have to keep to start this rebuild, which I find absolutely insane with a 13-3 team to try and do. I think you're going to have a flip of it where they just realize, look, we're going to have to be efficient in running, but we can't just hand the ball over and over and over again. And I think you're going to see the volume for Aaron Rodgers go back up this year. And because of Dillon and because of Jones and because of Jamal Williams, people are still going to have to respect that, and it's going to open things up for Aaron Rodgers a little bit. But it'll be interesting to see who is the real number 2 guy that steps up here. Is it going to be a running back, or is it going to be Lazard? Who's it going to be? Does he get back to those days of supporting 2 feasible wide receivers? And so we'll see. I personally think Adams is going to be absolutely here. And so Aaron Rodgers is just one of those guys that I think he's going to be high in touchdowns and he's going to be high in yards, and that's just why he lands as the back of the QB1.
Yeah, I mean, those are all great points. And I mean, I have to kind of stick to my guns as you see in my rankings. So the same thing I said about Drew Brees, right? With the similar comparison of Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. You talk about Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones.
Great comparison.
It's not completely different. Aaron Rodgers is a little bit younger, so I have Rodgers a little bit higher than Breeze, and then they're not being quite as safe with him. He's still the guy, and he's kind of got a chip on their shoulder to prove. But at the same token, kind of like Dallas was saying, I don't see it looking too much different than, say, what I said about Russell Wilson in Seattle. They'll start the year with this identity they're trying to recreate, and then realize about halfway through it's not working, and then open it back up to Rodgers. And so those are the kind of the 2 sides of that coin, that he's kind of the back end of that wide receiver 1 quarterback 1, to where he may dominate some games, but if they double cover Devontae Adams, who is he throwing to? So I think he's still a great quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks of this time frame. But I think he's in a perfect spot right there at the back end of the quarterback ones.
I think he's going to be. It's just going to really rely on that coin. Like, do they do what the Saints do when it reaches that midway point? Because they definitely have 2 different narratives here. Because if the Saints reach that point, or not the Saints, sorry, Seahawks. If the Seahawks reach that point, they're still going to do whatever it takes to win. But I do see a narrative where Green Bay reaches that point and they're like, you know what? it's just we're not as good as we hope to be, and so we're just gonna figure out what we have and start throwing things out there just to see who excels at what, and kind of use the rest of the season as testing ground. If so, it's gonna hurt Aaron Rodgers bad. So he still has that risk there that isn't there with Russell Wilson. So like the team identity is the biggest thing here for Aaron Rodgers. I like to believe in him that he's going to be able to come out, tear it up, and basically force his way into dominating and giving the coach no other choice. But again, if he really did lose it, like a lot of people seem to think he has, then that time could hit in the middle. I mean, they took a quarterback in the first. He's not somebody I envision seeing the field in another year at the earliest, but it's there. I mean, plenty of people are projecting that, so that he's got risk to him, but his price is nowhere near what it used to be. Where he's 2 years ago, he's drafted in the first round in some home. So showed us he had one game last year he had like 5 touchdowns, I believe. Still got it. I personally actually believe in Alan Lazard. Everybody's like, well, Devin Funchess is gone, so Alan Lazard's now the 2, and I'm like, I honestly had him the 2. I didn't think Funchess was a big threat, but it is a hit. So we're gonna see. You got, I mean, what's the next guy up? Like Kumaro? Like I'm not sure on that team. So they double Adams, and then the skill set doesn't work with Lazard. A big plummet here. So there is risk to him, but he's cheap enough to where it's okay though. All right, so that was our top 12 quarterbacks. We both picked one guy outside the top 12 that we wanted to talk about. So the first one we're going to go up with is Baker Mayfield. So when looking at our rankings right now, I have Baker Mayfield at 20, and he has Baker Mayfield at 12. So there's a huge discrepancy there. Wanted to talk about kind of why. So for me with Baker Mayfield, I kind of looked at two things when I was projections, and if I'm being honest, I may end up scooting him up a little bit, but I definitely don't see a world where I'd put him as a 1. But it's not, I don't think he's a horrible choice with how cheap he is, but I think the volume there is just go down. It's the most obvious take everybody takes. Stefanski's there. They're going to run the ball 700 times. I don't think it's that dramatic, but I see him as around that 3,600 passing yards kind of guy, and I see him staying in the mid-20s, but his interceptions are still going to bring him down lower than some other guys that I wanted. And I think he improves on that this year. He threw like 21 last year. I think I have him around like 11. But there's guys that I have slightly ahead of him, like the Phillip Rivers, the Cam Newton, people like that have just done it for a lot longer that I couldn't really push him ahead. But I still think he's a good shot with how late he is because we upside. But I have him as a mid tier with his use this year. But you've got him a lot higher than I do, Jay. So I'll let you go ahead and explain to me why I'm wrong. I'm all ears because I actually want to like Baker. I loved him coming out of college. So
Yeah, I'm a huge Baker guy, and actually was checking in. I'm buying into the narrative that everybody gave him a lot of trouble for all the commercials and stuff that he was in. He just wasn't really locked in, and there was some truth to that coming from the camp that he just wasn't really focused on his game. And so he came in. He's lost some weight. He's been really sharp and clean at camp, and that not too dissimilar to what we saw at Oklahoma after his sophomore year. He just kind of thought he was better than he was, and then when you really locked it in, refined it, I mean, you saw what happened that next year, and where he ended up being number 1 overall pick. And so I think with that team, I mean, all these guys that are really low on Nick Chubb because Kareem Hunt's going to take all of the passing volume. Well, so who's going to pass him the ball? And I think OBJ can't have another bad year like that. He's only going up. Jarvis Landry's been nothing but consistent. Hooper was a tight end 1 for a long time last year. So I think you got all these guys that are going to produce. I don't think they're the Super Bowl team as they were, whatever said to be a couple of years ago based on the weapons, but I think they will finally be a solid team they put together. They've worked on their offensive line. They worked on that squad as a whole. And so I think once that shine or that once the expectation is gone, I really see him producing well. So I have him a lot higher than I think most people this year. But I think you say if you believe in Hunt and you think he's going to be a great PPR machine, well, that's going to give you points from Baker. If you think OBJ is an elite wide receiver and he's finally healthy, well, that's going to give you points from Baker. If you think Landry is going to continue to be the same guy that he was, Hooper's going to be a top 10 tight end. Again, somebody got to get those guys the ball. And so I think putting those pieces together will put Baker in a good position.
So for me, where he's at 20, I'm looking at my list here, and there's a window of about 4 or 5 guys that are all about the same. So, like, although I have him at 20, I could also simultaneously have him as high as, like, 50. 14. And that's one thing I've mentioned to a lot of people about the whole Stefanski thing that I completely agree with. Is everybody's like, he runs, he runs, he runs, he runs. A lot of people don't even take into account, and this is one of the reasons I like Kareem Hunt so much, is they targeted their running backs like 80 times last. Like it was not just they each got like 20 and called it a day, and Kirk Cousins threw the ball 200 times. Like they still pass quite a bit, and a lot of people don't realize that when they look at run first offenses, is the passing is always so astronomically high that when you have a run first offense, it's still a lot higher than you would expect when you go to look at the actual numbers. So like if most heavy teams still pass more than they run. And that's what a lot of people don't ever really take into account. They don't realize. They're like, well, they run more than anybody else in the league, yet they still pass more than they ran. And so I definitely still see the world. I'm not somebody that wrote Baker off as in done, but I do think this year it's going to be interesting to see with the new coach and the new system how they work. I think his efficiency way up. I think his volume comes down, and that's my only take with that, and that's why I have him there. But like I said, he's in this group of guys where I could easily have him as high as 14. Well, it's just one of those where that's how he fell. By the time I finish my projections, he could be higher. But I honestly, I'm not out on Baker. I should explain. He's one of those guys that you can take late enough that his upside play is definitely there. That you probably should pull the trigger on it.
Absolutely, 100% agreement on that one. The other guy we want to talk about that we were really far apart on was the rookie phenom, Joe Burrow. So Dallas, you had him all the way up for some reason at 15, and I had him down at 23. So I'll kind of talk about why I had him so low, and then you can kind of see if you can change my mind to push him up a few spots. So Burrow, I'm a huge believer in Burrow. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. If this was dynasty, I'd have him a lot higher. But I'm not a huge rookie quarterback guy. I think Baker Mayfield had of the kind of the pocket passer guys, less of the Daniel Jones type Josh Allen, but Baker had a great year. Maybe a few other quarterbacks here and there. But I think the NFL system is just so complex, especially with the shortened offseason. I think, and Joe was very much he read the defense. He was very a smart-minded quarterback. And I think, I mean, you remember how Peyton Manning started out his first year or so, just like takes time in order to become a master of that craft at that level. And I think there's going to be a big trend, like a learning curve for Burrow, especially with the Bengals that aren't necessarily this hot, well-oiled machine in the first place. And so for me, I just don't see him as a really better quarterback this first year. Now, next year, that's probably going to be a lot different for me. But when I look at the guys I have above them, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Teddy Bridgewater, I mean, they're not going to be the like smash win you your league kind of guys, but they're going to be productive, and you can feel pretty confident in their production. And there's a lot of question marks about what Burrow's going to do for me this year, and I think some of that rookie fever of his long-term value has kind of inflated his redraft perspective. This is my mind. Wait, tell me why I'm wrong. What are your thoughts?
All right, so yeah, like basically everything you said, like I'm usually on par with that. Baker, I was a little bit different when I went through my projections with him. And this is one that 100% relies on weapons. So the fact that AJ Green is back and healthy, now there's question marks there, and that could absolutely knock AJ. I'll put it this way: AJ Green goes down, throw my projections for Joe Burrow out the window. Because the way I've projected everything out is I have AJ Green and Tyler Boyd just over 1,000 yards. I realize now when I was looking at other people's projections, they're side by side every time, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't see how everybody does that. Now I go and do my projections, and they're literally side by side. And I was like, okay, maybe I see now. Because what I had was more targets for AJ Green, but more catches for Tyler Boyd. So that ends up bringing them very close to each other. And then the John Ross is the real question mark here for me. I actually have him at like a 16 yards per catch projection. He had like 12 or 10 last year. But the year before that, he had 18. And I don't think he's going to be, where he's the third guy, the only time he's going to be targeted is when it looks good to Burrow. And so that's why I think he's going to be one of those efficient receivers that really doesn't get a whole lot of volume. But he actually finishes the year with like 500 yards for me when I statted it all out. And then I still gave Higgins, the rookie, about 400. And when I did all of this and statted it all out, I had him like just barely over 4,000 yards. I mean, barely. Now the record for a rookie quarterback, and this is why I didn't think it was that crazy, was Andrew Luck, who threw for 4,375. It's like almost 4,400 yards. So that's still a pretty significant gap between him and the record. And then because Joe Burrow, because exactly what you mentioned, he's a smart quarterback. The one thing that doesn't go away is being able to see once the play starts when somebody's actually open. That's something that kills me a lot of times with rookie quarterbacks is they pick their favorite and they just stare at it and then they don't look anywhere else. And then if it's not there, then they panic and then throw the ball away or throw a bad pass. That's one trait that I don't think Burrow's going to have. I think if it's not there, he's going to move on. And that's something that, because he's a smarter quarterback, I give him credit for. So I actually have him throwing 27 passing touchdowns, and that's why I have him so high. That is one more than Baker threw in his rookie year, and that sets the record as well. So I'm projecting a record-breaking season. So that's pretty hot takey, I guess. But he's somebody that, with the weapons around him, I just don't see a world unless he just comes out in flames. I mean, flames out completely. From what we've seen, he's just such an efficient quarterback. I mean, he threw 60 touchdowns and like 6 interceptions last. I was like, well, the interceptions, there's no way it stays that low. So I think I have him at like 9 or 10, something like that, a little bit higher for that. But it's just one of those where, as long as all the moving pieces around him are healthy, I just think he's more talented than the guys I have him right ahead of on a talent based look. And I think he's one of the few guys that has come out of college that can adapt pretty quickly. I mean, we're hearing all the camp talk right now where he just gets out there and he's just, bing, right down the field, hitting everybody. Against your own team, your defense, all that. So there's definitely, I don't read a whole lot into that. Like, I thought it was funny that there's a report come out that he threw a touchdown to Auden Tate, and then Dynasty blows up, and everybody picks him up. And I'm like, that's when I did my projections. I was like, I only have like 303 or 400 yards left to hand out, and I give Auden Tate like 2 of the touchdowns, and he's still almost. But having somebody like that to target in the end zone also helps him. That's why I think he's going to have his pick of the litter on anybody he wants to throw to. And so I just think they're going to be able to, as long as they build it around him, and when you invest that kind of capital into a quarterback, you do. I just think he's walked into one of the better situations that a rookie quarterback can ask for, because usually the situation is a lot worse. And that's one thing a lot of people don't take into account. These rookie quarterbacks come into absolutely awful situations, and so their rookie years are usually terrible. And I think his is actually a pretty good one. He lucked in with this offense. So I've got him as 15. And if he does that, I am terrified to see what his draft capital is going to be next.
You talked about the Cincinnati, and they're not in a terrible situation, but you didn't mention the best player in Cincinnati. So, and that's another thing for me for Burrow, is that I see them people are projecting Mixon to be a pretty high running back. And so it's like, I don't see that offense being top 5 in the NFL. So I think that ball's got to go somewhere. And I think it's very narrative heavy, but I think all of the crowning of Burrow as like the next Andrew Luck.
I don't see that. No.
I think that's going to be to his detriment. I mean, you look at a lot of the other guys. It's like he's already got it figured out. He's ready to go. And I've seen that same camp footage and tapes, and they're like, and I think that's going to be now huge Burrow guy long term.
For sure. So like, I'm looking at it now, and I've got Mixon with like just over 1,000 rushing yards and 373 receiving. I've also got Gio with 200. So like, he's just, for me, Burrow is just getting it from all angles, and that's why I have him as high as I do. But like I said, this wholeheartedly relies on health on the guys around him, because AJ Green's not the only injury risk wide receiver he's got. You got Ross as well, and I have, between the two of them, almost 1,600 yards of his passing from those two. If you replace those with Higgins and Auden Tate, I mean, you're looking at a completely different story. He'll barely hit over 3,000. So it's like you said, it's narrative-y. It's driven by specific things happening for him. But in a world where everybody's perfect, or not perfect, everybody's healthy, I think he's in a perfect situation you could ask for to jump into. I mean, it's one of the better ones I've seen in a very long time. Tyler's was an absolute nightmare, and we've seen what they were able to do with it last year. They came a lot further. But yeah, so thank you guys. That is our quarterbacks episode. This has been really great. I'm happy to be back. Happy to have Jay with me here along for this ride. Uh, guys have any kind of guys that we left out that you're upset about or want to argue about, then leave it in the comments below. We're here to read all of them. Hit us up on Twitter. That's the best ways to reach us both very fast. You got me at DallasFFO on Twitter, and you got him at Pick on the Block at Twitter because he trades every pick he has. And so that's been our first episode back, and that's our QBs. We'll see you in the running backs.
All right, see you guys.